Flagstaff. Right, now it is time to welcome Connor Tomlinson for the paper review. Welcome, Connor. Good morning to you.
Good morning to you, Nick.
I hope I find you in positive mood this Friday, despite this terrible, let's be honest, it's pretty grim news, isn't it, out there wherever you look. Look, I'd like to kind of sound you, if I may. I mean, if I flick through the headlines briefly, I think people have probably guessed, frankly, what's in them. We've got The Guardian, PM hit by number 10 Exodus as 4 aides quit in one day. I mean, not many people will know these aides, but that's, pretty heavy stuff. The Eye go on the same thing. Johnson's top team quits number 10 en masse. It kind of speaks to what they think of him, and it may influence the MPs as to whether they want him as their leader or not. The Daily Mirror, a rather pathetic front page. They're all laughing. They've taken one snap where Rishi Sunak and 2 colleagues are laughing. I don't know, it's either a joke or having a dig at Labour, which is political tit for tat. And of course, that was during the cost of living statement yesterday. So the Daily Mirror have gone, they're all laughing at you. Oldest trick in the book, I'm afraid. Get with it, Daily Mirror. You did well. I
think that was remarkably unfair, yes.
Yeah, it's just pathetic. And The Sun going on, ouch, with cost of living. Daily Express, tighten your belt, same theme. And I know you'll be talking about the Daily Mail, which we'll leave up there, which is meltdown in Downing Street. But, Connor, I want your view on this. Peter Bone stood up in Parliament, and I think he asked a really good question. He basically said to Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor, he said, it's the socialists that actually collect taxes and redistribute them in complex, expensive ways to those where they think they should go. And it's conservatives that like to leave more money in the pockets of people so that they are freer to make their decisions and their choices themselves. He's basically accusing Rishi Sunak of being a socialist. Was that fair?
Well, I think he's finally joining the rest of the country in realising that fact. Rishi Sunak, quite a while ago, I always come back to this, as I'm very interested in how the environmental policy is always going to cost us a lot of money down the road. Hopefully we can avoid that with some clever solutions. But Rishi Sunak doesn't seem to think that, because when pressed on if he'd costed the green levies, his answer was instinctively, well, I'm a fiscal conservative, and I'm always aware that I'm not spending everyone else's money. Well, I said this to your co-host on the network, Kevin O'Sullivan. That's essentially like a mugger running up to you in an alley and saying, don't worry, mate, I'll spend this very wisely. Well, I think the people of Britain will probably spend the money much more wisely in their own pocket. And as one of the listeners that you had on tweeted, we don't particularly want this loan that we're going to be paying back piecemeal. We don't want our futures divvied up and given up £40 a year in the future just so you can save us in the present. What we'd rather is some sustainable free marketeer policies that let us keep more of our own money in the first place. Because the more bureaucracy you have, the more redistributive models you have to divvy up our paychecks and send them to whoever you thinks it need more than us.
That just gets more complicated.
There's lots of money wasted as well, as we've seen with the furlough fraud thing.
And of course, we have an Office for Budget and Tax Simplification. We are now just piling in something that will be temporary at best. But these energy costs, and they're not going to come down within a year. Surely the answer is open up the supply, drop this heavy belief that renewables are going to make it cheaper and easier and healthier for us to live. We're sitting on other energy reserves that could help bring prices down, couldn't we?
Well, using 10% of the North Sea would give us energy independence as an entire nation for 50 years. And the idea that couldn't be made green is ridiculous. It's purely ideological. It's the idea that, gas and coal are off the table. Well, not with the sort of exhaust capture technologies that we've been developing, carbon capture, that could be improved in the next few years. You essentially put a cap on your exhaust of your car and the emissions come down. Well, the same principle can be applied to a power plant or gas fracking. So the idea that we couldn't make that low emission is ridiculous, and that could be very cost effective for us. The US did that under Trump, 2017 to 2019, brought all their gas manufacturing home, and they became the nation around the world that was leading the world in lowering their emissions.
Oh, and guess what, Connor? We could even sell some of it and get some tax revenue. Listen, I want to pick up one of your stories before we go to the break, and we're going to try and squeeze in a call as well. It's the Daily Mail. You obviously have picked up on this as one of your stories. Meltdown in Downing Street. Far away.
Well, obviously, you've had the 4 members of staff quit. I think a lot of people were pointing towards what was her name? Mirza,
Munira.
I believe. Yeah,
Munira
it's
Mirza.
a very difficult name to pronounce. I'm terrible this time in the morning. Lots of people have been pointing to that as her connections to Allegra Stratton in terms of the journalist who announced her departure, and they're saying, oh, Rishi Sunak's team is ossifying around him. I think the more important thing that people have overlooked is that she actually went to my alumni university, University of Kent, and studied under the former head of the Revolutionary Communist Party for her philosophy, or was it sociology, PhD. And I think that speaks a lot to the kind of people that Boris Johnson's been surrounding himself with. She may not hold those views now, but the fact that she got into the job under a supposedly conservative mayor of London and now conservative prime minister, and she still holds the view that the state, the government, is, as Rishi Sunak was accused of being, a sort of socialist entity which divvies up the money and gives it to people and tries to really improve their quality of life outcomes. Quite concerning that Boris is having these people give him so much advice.
Connor, let me pick up on that, because I think a lot of people will think, you know what, a policy chief's gone and we won't get these green taxes. All these ideas came from her, etc., etc. But she's not interested in us and he's not interested in us. What does this say to the MPs, though? 4 people going, 2 of which he probably fired last night just to make it look as if he was in control. Isn't this about a 14-year-old loyal servant to Boris Johnson, though, saying, hey, he's not fit to govern, that's why I've left? Isn't it more of the pot being stirred to wind up some of the MPs to put letters in?
Well, I think it's definitely more political opportunism than it is her leaving on principle. I think that she'll probably defect over to the Chancellor's side if there is a leadership bid in the running. And I think even the fact that, I mean, we went through the papers there. The Eye and the Guardian are on one side, the Daily Mail very much on the other side. But all 3 of them have their front pages adorned with the idea that Boris's time is ticking down and he has to go. I think she's seen the same sort of light and she's positioning herself very strategically.
Is it effectively about political manoeuvring?
Talk fast. Talk Radio.
And welcome back. I'm here with Connor Tomlinson, reviewing the papers, and we'll be getting straight to his next story after I flatter him for a minute. So, Connor, listen to this one. This is from HH. What a brilliant, intelligent young chap Connor Tomlinson is. Knows his stuff. More of him talk, please. In fact, make him Chancellor. Now, I have to tell you, when I started to read that, I thought it was going to be about me. So I'm a little disappointed about that, but well
Sorry
done.
to steal your thunder, Nick. I mean, I'm sure that's probably just, my mum's alternative Twitter account.
Yeah, it did said, see you for tea later. Now, Pete said, no, you can't. This is Fraxter will be interested in this answer. No, you can't opt out of the £200 energy loan. Too difficult to administer, as stated by Rishi on Martin Lewis' show last night. Well, there you go. Sums it up. It's too difficult to administer, too difficult to take you back, but we're going to lend you money even if you don't want it. Words I never thought I'd associate with a Conservative government. Anyway, Connor, your next story. I think it's the Times, right?
Yes, it's mainly about the cost of living crisis with the so-called Black Thursday, where all the economists got around the table and said, hi, yeah, average household costs are going to rise by about 2,500 quid per family. The green levies are now going to cost £150 extra annually, which is 8% of the total bills. The GDP growth forecast fell from 5% to 3.75%. And then there's a statistic that Boris keeps touting about us being the fastest growing economy in the G7. That's not particularly true. If you look at the extra statistics, that's over the year, where obviously a lot of the other G7 nations have been quite ferocious in their COVID enforcement. But in the last 2 quarters, we've slowed to 5th place. So inflation is really starting to creep in. That's why interest rates have doubled as of yesterday. The banks are really getting worried about this monetary policy they've been instituting over the course of the pandemic to pay for furlough by printing hundreds of billions at the Treasury and widening that gap between our currency and the amount of goods we can get for it.
Yeah, it seems to be odd times, really, when you think that with this inflation forecast, one of the other forecasts, so you have to take it with a pinch of salt, 7.25%. And the Bank of England was split, weren't they, yesterday? They really wanted to increase interest rates more. Be very interesting to see how that plays out. You picked up the Telegraph, which I haven't spoken about, actually. Quite a thumping headline, isn't it? It's the big squeeze and all sorts of red line graphs, which I don't really understand.
Yes, that coincides with the whole cost of living idea. And I was going to jump on the back of Sunak's idea to give you £40 a year over the next 5 years compared to the rate of energy, which is it's going to increase, especially as we continue to dismantle the coal plant instead of going carbon capture. As your previous guest said, it's going to take over a decade to get most of these nuclear plants operational. And I'm very happy that they're being built. You know, they're totally emission free. They're exactly as France do. They can create an energy surplus. We could sell that around the world, and we don't have to be reliant on Russia or China for oil and batteries. But in the interim, what we're going to power our entire grid on? Hopes and dreams? I mean, I went to Whitley Wind Farm during COP26 because we actually, did some things, not just sat around at a big party. And even they said, well, at the moment, the wind farms don't always make the energy back of what they cost to build. So,
but I've heard that for years, Connor. Why is it that suddenly it's got fashionable in Westminster and they seriously seem to believe, despite one whole quarter of not having enough wind to run the things, that we've got time to sit it out and pay these huge prices whilst we wait for their renewables vision to come to fruition? We've known for years the limitations.
I think they've given some very optimistic readings on where the technology could go, but a lot of people haven't given them the implications about how it should go. And I think a lot of civil servants and researchers, hundreds which sit in these departments, because they're insulated from the consequences a lot of the time, don't think everything through. A little example. So I did a response to the government's tree planting strategy, and nowhere in that was a mention of forest fire prevention. But similar strategies conducted in Australia and California were what caused the wildfires 2 years ago. And you think, okay, if you're going to pack our forests with imported trees with massive amounts of density, shouldn't we be more concerned as forest fires go up and you keep attributing that to climate change of all things? Shouldn't we be more concerned about increasing forest fires? No. So a lot of the consequences are overlooked often in these papers which are put out to say, the policies are all going to be bright and shiny without any adverse risks. And as we said with Rishi Sunak's policies, you can never calculate that.
It's a bit like fag packet policy making. Now, look, there's a vacancy now as a head of policy at number 10. Are you going to put your name forward?
I don't think very much as the case with the MPs and, as you'll know, all the sort of restrictions you do in the Commons. I think the bureaucracy, the red tape, and how respect for authority you're meant to have, that sort of bars me from the job because, and also, the drinking culture's pretty heavy.
I don't know.
I like one in the afternoon, but I'm not that much of an alcoholic, I can tell you. I might be banned from number 10.
I can tell you, I was in and out of number 10 when I had a brief stint after being an MP working in the Brexit department. I used to go in and out in Theresa May's department. I'll tell you one thing. She had an amazing work ethic. For all her faults as a leader, she had an amazing work ethic, and you wouldn't have sniffed alcohol anywhere in those offices. We were very boring by comparison. Change of subject. Daily Mirror, Priti Patel, Macron. You want to highlight what she's been saying to Macron?
Yes, President Macron has seemed to, obviously he's got his election coming up. Everyone says that every time his name gets brought up, but it seems far off into the future as ever. But he said the UK has an antediluvian system of migration where we're reliant on migrant labour. We have been for 50 years. And so we import essentially a slave class over to work for cheap. Now, some of that is true, but obviously that was also the argument of the Brexiteers, said we shouldn't be importing mass people over from Europe because it's not good for them to work in low-paid jobs. And it's not good for us to hollow out our working class. I thought it was very interesting that Macron was picked up and ran with that argument, but in his own defence of his own country for not policing France's borders, because obviously a lot of people are fleeing France in migrant boats. There was an amazing statistic actually of where this time last year there were only about 8,000 people that had crossed, and now it's already reached 20. In 2021, it reached 28,000. Sorry, so it went 20,000 extra people in small boats had already crossed. And in January, our total is staggering. We had the total for 2021 in January on one day this month already. And
such is the pace that there's something like 4.7 million is being spent each day on 37,000 asylum seekers as they're coming in, because we cannot process these applications fast enough, which is one of the reasons they're all coming in by boats. Of course, you get the backlog, they're in hotels, and the costs keep coming, don't they? And that's what keeps challenging us. I want a quick word with you on something else, if I may, Connor, on this one. The governor of the Bank of England, he said, nobody asked for a pay rise because otherwise that will fuel inflation. In a word, are you going to ask for a pay rise?
Well, I'm actually entirely self-employed.
I knew that. You could have just gone along with me and play. I knew that.
I will always ask for a pay rise because I think that obviously my company is worth every penny spent.
Of course it is. Of course it is.
Yeah, but I would be very suggestive to see. Oh, if you think obviously everyone's so hard up and they shouldn't be asking for more money, why wouldn't you like to donate a little bit more?
Well, I suppose it's easy to say for someone on probably who's on £500,000. Connor Tomlinson, once again, thank you very much for joining us for the paper review.